Yeah, awfulizing, I mean, I think it's kind of self-explanatory. It's, as I've mentioned, I'm a worrier and I can be a bit neurotic. And awfulizing is just sort of taking a situation and then spinning out in your mind like the worst case
Mm.
scenarios that could come out, and sort of assuming that's what's going to happen. And I have a tendency to do it a lot, and I'm really trying to work on that. Um, Partly because it drives Adam absolutely insane.
Oh, how does it come up?
Well, it's just like I'll be sitting on the couch and I going, well, what if this happens? And okay, what if I go do this pilot and I have to go to New York, which did end up happening, and I can't see you guys? And what if you're working and you can't bring Jack? And I don't have, what if we're shooting on Saturdays and I can't come visit you and it's going to be a whole month? And, spinning on and on and on. And it's just like he wants to wait and see what happens and deal with it, which is the healthy approach. So I've asked him because it can actually say to me, like, I'm like, just point it out. Just
Yes.
say, Liz, you're awfulizing, stop and just take a breath. And if he does that, I'm like, if you do it in a gentle way, it
Yeah.
can actually just stop me in my tracks and make me go, oh, you're right. Forget everything I said. And I can just kind of be back in the moment. But I really need someone to point it out to me because otherwise I just keep on going.
And what is not helpful is when people are like, that's not going to happen. Well, maybe it could happen. Or, well, that's going to be fine. And you're like, well, maybe it won't be fine. So
Right.
it's like, it's not, they can't make you promises. So it's not comforting for people to say, that'll never happen. Because it can happen.
Do you ever awfulize?
Yes, I do. I do. Well, and it's interesting because in psychology circles, they use the term catastrophizing. And catastrophizing is when we imagine the most catastrophic outcome that could happen, which is first you predict that something bad's going to happen, and then if it did happen, it would be a catastrophe. So, yeah, and I think it's a very common thing. And probably in some ways it's adaptive because then you're thinking like, well, if all these things happen, what would I do? And you're kind of like, you've kind of got your emergency escape plan or whatever going. But you're right. Every medicine can become poison, and at some point it's helpful to think through like negative possibilities or to say like, well, I'm going to join AAA because what's going to happen if my car breaks down on the freeway, and to take action and do it. But when it becomes counterproductive or when you're just spinning your wheels or all these possibilities that are very remote, it drags you down without being helpful in any way.
Yeah, and I mean, I think some people would say in awfulizing, you're almost, it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
Like you're saying, oh, well, if my boss hates me, then I'm going to get fired and then I'm going to lose my health insurance
Yeah.
and all this. And it can almost, some people think sort of bring in bad things
Yeah.
by imagining them happening. I'm of the opposite where I feel like if I worry, as I've said, worry
Yeah.
about something that won't happen. So those are the dueling philosophies of life.
But I think your point is just if you're aware that you're doing it, that's very helpful because then you can be like, well, is this leading me to constructive action or is this just bringing me down to no purpose? But you have to realize that you're doing it, and it can be very hard to catch yourself in it.
And I also think, in terms of what you talk about with sort of catching emotions
Yeah.
and, psychological states, like it can really bring down the people around you.
Yes.
If they're just perceiving this just like constant stream of negativity.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens with Adam. It's like he just starts feeling like there's just too much negativity, whereas I don't see it that way because it's coming out of me, I guess.
Right.
So I do think that one of the really bad things about awfulizing isn't just what it does in your own mind, but also how it affects the people around you.
Right. Well, just as an example of emotional contagion, not really awfulizing, but I'm a very fearful driver. You're a fearful driver, but you drive all the time, and I don't drive that much. Well, Jamie and I had to go on a drive, and he had back surgery, so I needed to drive. And I'm a fine driver. But I was nervous, like driving in New York City, like just getting on to where I needed to get. And I wasn't sure exactly which route to go because sometimes we go one way, so we're going to go the other. And so I became increasingly agitated in my talk to him. And he's like, calm down. You're making me nervous because he's like the calmest driver in the world. And I was like, right, this is not helpful. Like me getting worked up, it's making me worked up. And that's not helpful to my driving. And I'm making him anxious, and that's not helpful. So just like dial it back.
Yeah.